Hello, I'm Matt from World of Ukes, and this is a selection of 15 tips and tricks for ukulele players. I recorded this last year as part of the Wireless Ukulele Festival series, and I thought as we are now entering in the UK a further lockdown period, it would be a good time to put it out there so that if people are at home and struggling a little bit, that it would give them a little bit of distraction. So I hope you enjoy it and find something useful. Wouldn't it be nice if you could liven up your strumming without lifting a finger? Now, I'm not going to show you how to do that, but I am going to suggest something to do with lifting a finger. Basically, if you, during your chords, you lift a finger off and put it back on during the same strum, you can liven things up a little bit. First of all, I'll do something quickly without lifting a finger. So just some C's, some F's and some G's, and it sounds fine, but a little bit dull. What I'm going to do now is raise a finger during that same sequence, on and off, and you can get a bit more texture into your chords. I cheated there by playing a bit different in the second half, but basically all I did was during that chord progression, every now and again I would lift off a finger and put it back on. Now you might have noticed I'm lifting different fingers in different places. I think that's fine. So for a G, if you lift one finger, you would sound like this. Lift another finger, you sound like this. And lift the first finger, you sound like this. But I think they all sound a little bit better than just the basic strum. Now, I'm not going to talk about which chords and which fingers. It's something to try on your own. When you're doing a song, just lift a finger, any finger, and see if it sounds nice. That's tip number one. Another way to liven up your chords is to use both your finger and your thumb. Basically, you strum with the finger and your thumb follows along. So in one strum, you get two different motions, two different noises happening. So what you're doing is with one finger you're strumming down, but as that's coming down, your thumb is following through. Now, it takes a lot of practice to get things very fast, and you'll notice that that's just one element of, the fast techniques that George Formby impersonators and tribute acts do. Andy Eastwood, for example, although he's a lot more than that, he uses his finger and his thumb a lot in his play, but just give it a try. You can do it slowly. And then when you get a bit faster, you can introduce it into your songs. I hadn't planned to introduce this particular tip, but I have a buzz, so I'm going to address it. Now, if you come across a buzz that wasn't there when you got the instrument, one thing that it can often be is one of the tuners. In this one, there are tiny little screws on the back of the buttons, and they can come loose. Sometimes something inside your tuner comes loose if it's an enclosed one. But basically I've got a buzz now which wasn't there when I first started this workshop. which is quite handy because I want to get rid of it. Now, if you don't know which string it was, you hear it somewhere on the fingerboard, one thing to do, first of all, is to hold on to one of your tuners one at a time to see where that buzz is. So I can still hear the buzzing while holding that one down. Basically, you're trying to get your hand over every part of the tuner. I'll try this one. That buzz is still there. And I'm going to try that one. And that seems to have got better. When I let go and try this one, it's rattling again. Now what I suspect is happening is that tuner button has come a bit loose and it's rattling about. So all I need to do is, with a little screwdriver, just tighten up that screw. Not overly tight, but just to stop it rattling around. And I should find, although I've gone slightly out of tune, there's certainly no buzz. So I can move on to the E string, having decided that my G and C are in tune with each other. During that last segment, I was holding on to my tuners and I've moved them a little bit, enough to make my ukulele go out of tune. Now I've got tuners, they're either all downstairs or the one on my phone which is filming this tutorial. So I don't have one to hand, and I want to tune my ukulele just by ear. Now it won't work if you're playing with other people. You might not be exactly in tune, but at least I can get my ukulele in tune with itself so that I can carry on playing, and it doesn't matter if my chords aren't exactly right. As long as I can hear them okay and they're good enough for me, that'll be fine. So what I can do is do that with the strings, and I'm going to play the G string first of all. Now I'm just going to have to think back to what a G string usually sounds like, and I think that's probably close enough. But as long as it's reasonable, just go with it. So that's my G. I want to do the C next, and if I get the C string at the 7th fret, that's a G also. That's my G string, and that's my 7th fret at the C string. So it's a bit flat, so I just need to tune it up a little bit. So now they are the same note, or near enough that, for my ear, that it'll be okay. So I want to do the E string next. Now I stay on the C string and do the 4th fret, and then play the open E. I'm basically just trying to get both notes sounding the same. Once they're at the same, roughly at the same pitch, might not be perfectly accurate if I put a tuner on, but I don't have one. And then I move up to the E string and I play the 5th fret at the on the E string, and that should be the same as the A string. Now you can hear they're definitely different. If you notice there, I just grabbed the wrong tuner and tune my E string out. So do that again. So now it sounds the same as the E. So if I do each one in turn, so you've got the G string open and the C string at the 7th fret. They're quite similar. Then do the C string, 4th fret. They're quite similar to the on the open E, And then E string at the 5th fret should be about the same as the A. And if I play a chord, close enough for me to carry on without sounding horrendous. When you play a C string, you just use one finger on your fretting hand. And there are lots of other one finger chords. We often do down the C string at the 3rd, the 2nd and the 1st. But there's lots of other ones to try as well. I would encourage you to investigate what one finger chords sound nice and build them into your songs. So we've done the C string. 3rd fret sounds good, 2nd fret sounds good, and the 1st fret sounds good. And you can do the same with just one finger on the E string. That's at the 3rd fret. I think that sounds nice. I think the 2nd fret is, it's a different kind of sound, but it's interesting. Going back to the 3rd. First, good as well. So one finger on the E string or the A string in any of the first 3 positions I think sounds interesting. Maybe not together, but... And then you can carry on and experiment further and find them on different strings as well. So on the C string, that's just at the 1st and 2nd. It sounds a lot more impressive than it actually is. And then on the G string, they're quite challenging ones, but yeah, have a go at just using one finger on the different places on the fingerboard and see if it sounds good. The next tip is something for people who might be struggling with their D chord and cramming all of their 3 fingers in a line to make the D. I confess that when I started, I struggled to get them all lined up properly, and I would often get a buzz or feel like it was uncomfortable because my fingers were crammed together. Now, this is just in general advice. If you're struggling with a chord, maybe try and find a different way to form the same chord. So what I did was I actually had my fingers like this. Now that looks a bit strange, but actually what I'm doing, if you imagine a G7, just a normal G7, I'm making the same shape as if I push my first finger up so they're all on the same fret. But then I'm transferring that down to the D string, the D chord, sorry. So there's a picture of that now. That's just one way of doing it. Another way is to flatten your finger so you're just playing the chords, the strings in a D chord. I can't do that one, but it works for some people if you've got bendy fingers. So if you're struggling with a chord, try and find a different way of doing it, especially if you've got problems with your hands or your grip. Certain regular methods of playing a chord can be tricky. Another alternative fingering to think about is with B flat. I don't know if you've ever played a B flat and it sounds a bit like this. Because you've got to do that first finger barred across. Now, if you do that and struggle with it, and you find you're avoiding B flat, try doing it a different way. The way I do it mostly is with my first finger doing the B flat on the first fret, on the top two, on the E and the A string, and then I add my middle finger, the second fret of the C string, and my ring finger on the third fret of the G string. So I'm not having to worry about these two strings down here, which would normally be covered with a bar. I'm just doing those top two with a bar. I often get it wrong, so I'm using my first finger to cover the first two strings and not worrying about the ones which are taken care of by these fingers. And of course it works all the way up the fingerboard in the same shape as well. While I was doing that B flat, you might have noticed, if you were very observant, I had my thumb firmly planted in the middle of the neck. The reason to do that is basically gives you stability for one, and I find it with that thumb pushed down, my fingers have to come down straighter onto the fingerboard, and that's useful because if your fingers are coming at this angle, say you're kind of cupping your thumb round, your fingers are flatter and therefore they're more likely to hit other strings apart from the one that they're supposed to be fretting. So if I'm down here, I can easily hit these other strings even though I'm only fretting that one. Whereas if my thumb is on, my finger comes down straighter, especially if I train myself to do so. So the straighter my fingers come down, the less likely they are to interfere with other strings, and that's down to, in part, my thumb position. When you're doing bar chords, often you might hear a buzz because of the position of your finger, and particularly those grooves in your finger going over where the strings are, and it doesn't quite form a perfect contact. Now, the smallest space on this between the string and the fret is at the fret rather than, you know, right in the middle. So when I'm doing bar chords, although they're not my favourite, when I'm doing my bar chords, I try and, instead of having my finger, my barring finger, right in the middle of the frets, I try to get it almost on top of it, and that is meaning that there's less space for my finger to have to push down. So I've got my finger pretty much in line, the edge of my finger is on the fret, which I think gives you better contact, and just the difference of moving your finger a couple of millimeters so it's more in line with the fret can make a big difference in your bar chords. Particularly when they're starting out, people often struggle with changing chords. If I use a simple transition between A minor and C, that's often what you'll see when you see someone who's new to the instrument. You might be new yourself. You'll see someone look and put their finger down, and then it's time for the next chord, and they're looking and putting their finger down almost slightly after they want to start playing. And one thing to help speed those transitions is to think about what your next chord is and where your fingers are going to be. So if I start there, I know I'm going to go to the C, so I can hover my ring finger just over where it needs to be. case of thinking ahead, what's coming next and where can my fingers be, so that that is the shortest and easiest transition possible. So my finger is just a centimetre away, so it makes the transition a lot easier. Now that's a simple example, but it works with everything. If you think ahead to what your next chord is and think about where your fingers need to be and hover them in place, that's quite handy and speeds things up no end in time. When I play, I use a drone a lot, so I use one string open constantly during the thing that I'm playing, to give a little bit of a folky feel, and another method of making something that's quite simple sound more complicated than it actually is. So if I just do, this is when picking, if I do a simple just run down on this E string, sounds quite boring. But if I, each time, using my two fingers here, also incorporate the C string open while doing the fretting on the E string, it sounds more interesting. So that's something to experiment with. When you're doing a little riff or a little tune, try incorporating a open string to see if it complements it. And in that case I'm using also the G string open. And it sounds quite complicated if you don't know what's happening, but it's actually very simple. So give that a whirl. I don't know if you've ever heard people talk about open tuning and what that is. Now I'm just going to do a quick experiment to show you what open C tuning is. All it means is that when I play my strings open, I'm going to be playing a C chord. To do that, I'm going to tune down the A string so it's the same as my G string. So I'm going to play the G just as a reference note and then tune my A string down till they're roughly the same. So now I've got G, C, E and G again. Now if I play my strings open, that's my C chord. It also has the added advantage that if I bar across the strings, with ignoring these fingers but just a straight bar across, major chords just by putting my one finger in the bar. So that's open C tuning. Interesting thing to do is look up open tunings, different open tunings, but open tuning of C is really easy because you're just tuning one string down and then it's nice and easy to go back up the way as well. Just by using the E string at the 5th fret as a reference note. And now I'm back to normal. If you want to impress your friends by playing further up the neck, but don't want to get too complicated, one quick way to do something at that end is to follow the dots on your ukulele neck. That's, in this case, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th and the 12th. 3rd, 5th, 7th and the 12th. And I'm just going to put my first finger across the top two strings on the 3rd position, move that exact same shape up to the 5th, up to the 7th and up to the 12th. And then I can play something like this. It's not that amazing, but it's using a lot more of the fingerboard and it's in tune with itself, sounds interesting, and you can show off. If you fancy rocking out at home and doing a ukulele solo, one of the techniques that you can use to spice it up is bending, and it's as simple as it sounds. Well, it's maybe not quite as simple as it sounds, but it's as obvious as it sounds. Basically all you're doing is bending a string. Now, to bend that note, I'm going to choose a random note. I'm going to go for the 9th fret on the C string, and I'm going to pluck that string, but then as I pluck it, I'm going to pull it down towards me, always keeping in contact with the fret. And then I let it relax again. And then introduce more notes. You can pluck it as many times as you like, but basically all you're doing is pulling a string out of position but keeping it on the fretboard. Another way of livening up your instrumentals is to apply some vibrato. Now, if I play just a little run without doing anything to improve the dynamics of it, it would sound like this, for example. It's fine, but it's a bit dull. What if it sounded a bit more like this? So basically there's a little wave in each note, and that's achieved by applying a bit more pressure on and off. So I'm just basically pushing down a bit harder and a bit softer, but keeping the note fretted. Some people like to move their finger from side to side, and they get faster over time, but I prefer to apply the extra pressure, and all I'm doing is pushing it down a bit harder, on and off. So that was 15 different tips and tricks for ukulele players. I hope you got something out of it, and thanks very much for watching.